Spread out beneath the foothills of the Great Dividing Range, the Healesville Sanctuary was started 70 years ago on a piece of virgin bushland. More than 78 acres of the park are devoted to exhibits. Another 200 acres remain undeveloped, preserved as habitat for local wildlife.
We make people try and see animals in a natural bushland habitat and just make them appreciate that if we don't do something to preserve those species, then we're going to lose some very, very important animals indeed.
The eyesight of the wedge-tailed eagle is pretty phenomenal. They have been documented at hunting brown rabbit.
The sanctuary takes in and rehabilitates hundreds of injured animals every year. Those that can't be returned to the wild participate in educational programs. Here you'll see healthy examples of all kinds of Australian wildlife, from predators like the dingo and the lace monitor, to local birds like the sacred ibis, the broga crane, and the kookaburra. The park is also a wildlife research center. The first and only platypus birth in captivity took place here in 1943. The sanctuary has also bred lesser-known and rarer animals, like the eastern-barred bandicoot and the yellow-bellied gliders. The short-beaked echidna is this continent's version of the anteater. They live on small insects, like termites and ants, and are found throughout Australia. The echidna is a monotreme, an ancient life form that shares traits of both reptiles and mammals. For example, the echidna lays eggs, but once the eggs hatch, it nourishes its young with milk. Like a lizard, the echidna's limbs are attached to the sides of its body rather than beneath it. This leg structure allows the animal to disappear into the ground within seconds. Now, notice it's got a long nose there. Now, does that bite or?
No, inside the long nose is a very long sticky tongue. So that goes right into the anthill or the termite mound. The termites stick to it, and then it brings it back into its mouth.
It's got such big feet. What do they use them for?
They use these feet for digging into termite mounds, but also they use them to escape predators. Would you like to see it happening?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, let's go. So you can see once it goes down into the ground, it just digs in immediately, just scraping the soil around it. And if you feel right down at ground level, the quills are right on the ground. So any animals trying to get under it have a very hard job.
Boy, Simon, you're right. You can't even pick this thing up. What a great means of defense.
Yeah, it's completely protected now that it's digging underground.
The world's only other monotreme is a furry cousin of the echidna. The duck-billed platypus has got to be one of the strangest animals I've ever met. They're common in the streams of eastern Australia, but because they are shy and mostly nocturnal, very little is known about them. Researchers here are working to fill that information gap by gathering basic biological data on them.
Healesville Sanctuary is the best place to study platypus in the whole world. And the reason is that we have a very healthy wild population living in the stream on the sanctuary. We also have a population that's living in captivity that can be studied at the same time.
Dr. Melody Serena of Chicago's Brookfield Zoo has been trapping and radio tagging platypus here for almost 2 years.
Platypus is fitted with a little miniature radio transmitter. And this is just a radio receiver, but it's a special one because it's for wildlife. It's especially sensitive. And this aerial picks up the strongest signal when it's pointing straight at the platypus. Ah, here it is. This is what I've been looking for. This is the burrow of the platypus that we've been looking for. You can see that she's been going up the bank, up and down on this side where the moss is worn away. She's been going up and down on this side as well, on the other side of the tree fern. The whole point of the platypus program at the sanctuary is to help conserve the animals in the wild and also to provide optimal conditions for them in captivity. Both the feeding tanks and the display tank have natural materials in it like logs and rocks and so forth. There's live freshwater crayfish that hide down among the rocks, and the platypus can forage for that live food in the display tank.
Because its eyes and ears close completely when it goes underwater to feed, the platypus has evolved its own special method for detecting food. Its soft, leathery bill is lined with receptors, which pick up minute electrical currents produced by crayfish, worms, and other food sources. Boy, Melody, this looks like something like a rabbit with a duck's beak on it.
They are very unusual animals.
And why is he signing holding this by the tail?
In the male platypuses, there's a spur right here. You can see it.
Yeah.
Well, this animal is actually just 1 year old, but in the 2-year-old male, they produce a kind of a poison which they can use by to actually envenom people. And so if you hold it by the tail, you can stay out of the way.
I see. And I noticed his fur seems so soft.
A platypus has fur just like an otter's fur. It's very thick and dense because the animal's aquatic, and so it's important that the animal stay well insulated and dry in the water.
Now his feet look just like a duck's foot. Is that what makes him go so fast in the water?
Well, the feet are interesting, especially the front feet, because they have two different purposes. They have wide special paddles for swimming. You can see how they open up wide in order to allow the animal to swim very quickly in the water, but they also have strong claws so the animal can burrow.
Well, this is really something I've never dreamed I'd ever get to see a real platypus. Thanks a lot.
Oh, it's my pleasure. They're absolutely fantastic animals.
The Melbourne Zoo was established in 1857, making it the oldest zoo in Australia and one of the oldest zoos in the world. But its exhibits couldn't be more up to date. Just take a look at this Australian bushland exhibit.
This could be called an interactive exhibit. Nothing separates the visitors from the animals, and you're welcome to meet them up close. At this range, it's easy to see why roos, as kangaroos are known down here, belong to the family of macropods, which means big feet. Flightless emus are Australia's version of the ostrich and are still common on the plains of northwestern Australia. On the other hand, kangaroos can be found all over the continent.
There are dozens of different kinds of kangaroos. They may vary in size and color, but their shape and their way of getting around are pretty much familiar to all of us. Some kangaroos, however, due to a quirk of evolution, live in trees, and they have more in common with monkeys than they do with other kangaroos.
Kangaroos that live in trees? Well, all roos once lived in the trees that long ago covered a great deal of Australia. But when the climate changed and dried out, most of them took to life on the ground. For some reason, these Goodfellows tree kangaroos climbed back into the branches where they could browse and forage for leafy food sources. Unfortunately, their forest habitat is quickly disappearing due to modern farm and timber operations.
80% of their natural habitat is just about already gone. So therefore there are species that we have to concentrate in captivity, breeding them and genetically keeping a viable population going to either release back into the wild, hopefully, if there is area to release them back into, but also to keep that viable genetic material worldwide.
I noticed he walked down the tree backwards. Why do they do that?
Yes, for balance actually, because they're so robust in the hindquarters here. They actually shimmy down the tree backwards to keep their balance, so they don't fall.
I noticed his claws and hands. They aren't adapted for climbing, are they?
No, but they're quite dexterous though, using their claws for this particular reason, just for grasping leaves and branches. Yeah, so they're very strong and they can pull the branch towards them. Depending on wherever they're situated in the tree.
And what about their tail?
Yeah, that's used as a balance, as a rudder. So when they jump from tree to tree, it keeps them balanced. So therefore they don't run into trees and fall headfirst onto the ground.
You know, it's one thing to see a bird in a tree, but to see kangaroos climbing in trees, I guess that's only in Australia, huh?
This is true. This is true. We've got some pretty fascinating animal species in this country.
It's always a treat to see a beautiful butterfly. Here at Melbourne's Butterfly House, though, visitors can be captivated by some 800 of these delicate fluttering creatures, all at one time.
Ernst, this looks like a dinner table for butterflies. Is that what it is?
Yes, it is. It's instead of having to use natural flowers, we made this arrangement where we place nectar in these little disc areas.
How do they know how to come down to these 3 tables?
Well, they see, of course, when they fly by, they see the colors, and that attracts them initially. But once they land on these little discs, they have actually their taste buds are under their feet itself. And the moment they get in touch with this artificial nectar solution, they realize that it's food.
Now, notice this little thing looks like an arm keeps sticking in those holes. What is that?
That's its proboscis. It's like a straw.
It's like a tongue?
Long tongue, no, like its mouth, actually, and it uses this to suck up the liquid.
Their wings look real delicate. They're thin little legs. How do they survive?
Oh, I think they're pretty tough. You can't handle the wings because the coloration comes off, but the structure itself, it has pretty strong vines which are hardened and sort of form ribs. And really all a butterfly has to do is live for about 4 weeks, produce enough time, and lay eggs, and so it doesn't have a long time to live.